Welcome to my third podcast. In this podcast, we'll be talking about the human constitution, specifically the mental and emotional bodies. We'll be continuing on the theme of the soul evolving in consciousness. And today I'll be beginning a more detailed discussion about the human constitution, its evolution, and its various components. You'll see that it is a conscious, balanced integration of the forces of the threefold personality, which produce the lighted instrument capable of recording and reflecting the light of the soul. Gradually, the lights of the personality, mental, emotional, and physical nature, and the soul will blend, and we will become living souls, and we will become the lighted way. Now, we understand 160 years ago that Darwin talked about the evolution of the human form. Our focus here is with the soul, the evolution of consciousness of the personality and its three bodies of expression. A discussion of the human constitution is about evolving your consciousness by bringing the lower three bodies, that is, the threefold nature or threefold personality, into an alignment and integration with the will of the soul. Just a brief recap, I talked about the spiritual triad, which is made up of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. And and we understand that the spiritual triad exists, or it exists between the monad and the soul. And the purpose of the soul is to allow that energies of the spiritual triad to merge with our lower personality. This is over multiple incarnations. Late in the evolution of the soul, the personality will create a bridge, as we talked about before, and it will be created between the abstract mind and the higher manas, or the higher parts of the soul. Basically, the bridge, what we're talking about, is called the Antakarana, the Sanskrit term, and it will be able to create a bridge between our concrete mind, our rational thinking part of ourselves, and the higher mind of the soul to allow us to access the spiritual triad. We understand that as much as we purify our mental, our thoughts, our emotions, our emotional body, then we provide the soul with a better body for its light to come forward. So our entire purpose here initially is to create an alignment with the soul, allow for purification to take place. We will talk about purification much later in detail, but understand allowing the pure energies of the higher self, the soul, to come forward and to replace the lower elements of ourself, parts of ourself. So the parts of the mind. What is the purpose of the human mind and evolution? Human mind has intelligence and is the central faculty for cognition of man's life and his environment. It separates the human kingdom from the animal kingdom, and it carries a major aspect of divinity which has been revealed to us called active intelligence. There's three major aspects of God that have been revealed to man. The aspect of Atma, or will, the aspect of love, or Buddhi, and then there's the aspect of intelligence. And through the mind, man registers the soul's intent, and it contributes to his mental understanding and will lead toward a progressive evolution and unfoldment of civilization. So as much as man comprehends the energies and natures of the soul and the transformation of the spiritual self, the personality, into the spiritual self of the soul, then man can become a conscious and willing agent of the soul to help evolve civilization. The human mind and consciousness have evolved through the intellect by the spiritual seeker using discrimination and developing the abstract mind. Discrimination has nothing to do with anything to do with the races or anything like that. It has to do with discriminating in thought. I differentiate between this and that. I discriminate between this lesser energy or thought or feeling, this anger, this hatred, and I choose love and balance it out with inclusiveness and understanding. So that is a form of discrimination. I choose to do something. The process allows the spiritual individual, the ability for registering impressions and for contact in the soul and the spiritual triad. So as much as you cleanse your mind with the purification, through purification and meditation, we're going to be talking about this many, many times in this podcast and future podcasts. If you clear out the mind, you clear out the lower part of the self, then you will be open to the higher energies and impressions from the soul. On the spiritual path, as we expand our consciousness, we aspire to allow the higher manas, or the higher energy of the soul, to guide our mind in our thinking and our thought construction. In a future podcast, I will be talking about what's called right thought form creation, which is basically creation of thoughts at the soul level. We spoke before about the mental plane consists of the concrete mind, being the lower part, the abstract mind, and the body of the soul, or known as the causal body. The concrete mind is also called the lower finite mind. Concrete mind is the reasoning and conceptual, the logical, discriminating and separating things in consciousness principle. It is also the creator of new thoughts and ideas in the lower mind. This is seen by the scientist, the architect, the accountant, or anybody who analyzes data and comes to conclusions and distinguishes and determines or discriminates between the real and the not real, and sees the world through the 5 basic physical senses. When thought forms, the thought energy of the concrete mind by the personality becomes too focused, it blocks any ability for registering impressions and illumination from the soul. So if you get too deep down and mired in your thinking process, you're basically using the denser part of thinking in your process, and you're blocking out the impressions. So for this, it is recommended for the spiritual seeker to practice detachment and dispassion. Now, detachment, we're talking about detachment from physical plane distractions, detachment from perhaps desires, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that are and things that are distracting you in your environment. Dispassion, which means taking the emotional edge off of your feeling nature. That isn't turning off your emotions, but it's taking the emotional edge off so you can become more intelligent and discriminative in your consciousness. This is most readily accomplished through meditation where you learn to identify with the higher energies of the soul. Now, the other 2 parts of the mind are called the abstract mind, and it's located in the higher mental plane, and it shares the same space as the soul or causal body. Causal body, I'll be using the term in these talks. Causal body is considered to be the body of the soul. It's not something you can see; it's only something you can sense. It's where all the memories and experiences from previous incarnations is stored in the causal body. And it functions as a bridge between the concrete mind, that is the physical plane and the 5 senses and the highest aspect or mind of the soul. When the alignment is achieved in meditation, the personality can receive impressions, ideas, intuition, and love from the soul and the spiritual triad via the abstract mind. Now, the body of the soul, I mentioned before, is called the causal body. That's a term used in esoteric literature. Its purpose is to facilitate the evolution of the personality of the spiritual seeker to evolve into the greater self of awareness. It stores, like I said, the highest wisdom and essence learned from both good and bad experiences. The essence of what was learned is a kind of wisdom stored in a part of that causal body. And from an esoteric viewpoint, we have something called good actions and bad actions. Basically, good karma, bad karma. So the bad actions or karma are the unwise use of energy and force. This is all from an esoteric viewpoint. The unwise use of energy and force, often through selfish motive by the personality. So when you're doing something with your me-only consciousness, I don't care about anybody else, what they think. I'm just going to do this. I don't even care what happens. So there could be consequences. So that creates, quote, bad actions and or karma. When we speak of karma in this way, we are usually referring to events and situations in a particular lifetime when the personality is focused on expressing motives, which may be selfish, and the soul was not the guiding factor. In cases like this, there's a stored negative energy in the causal body that must be transformed and purified. So this bad energy, if it's not resolved in this life or balanced out or neutralized, then it becomes stored in the causal body for future incarnations to be worked out. Now we have good energy or good karma, and it's referring to the higher expression of consciousness within the personality, produced by performing non-selfish deeds, such as altruism and service to others. Basically, if you have soul consciousness within you, you're basically working with good karma because you're coming from a space from the soul. You're coming from a space of a non-selfish entity. From actions and experience, wisdom is gained, and through wise use of energy and force, I'll come back to this phrase, the wise use of energy and force, that is of thoughts and feelings and physical activities, the personality together with the soul learns and uses this knowledge to facilitate its growth. So initially, when you're learning this information, you're learning as a personality about this esoteric viewpoint. We basically call it thoughts and feelings, but we're basically talking thoughts and feelings are made up of energy, and the force is like our expression of will and involves physical activities. So basically, good karma, good energy, expression is from a person who is conscious of the fact that they are helping others, but they're not thinking of themselves as simply says, oh, look at me, I'm doing this great thing, as opposed to simply said they're just doing what's necessary in the moment and they're facilitating service to others. So from actions and experience, wisdom is gained, as I mentioned. The causal body of the soul will last throughout countless incarnations and is only discarded at the end of the spiritual journey on earth, when all the karmic experiences are purified and the need for the cycle of rebirth is no longer needed. So this is an interesting concept to consider, that you do not need to incarnate on the planet anymore, but that only in the esoteric literature, the Ageless Wisdom teachings, we basically understand that, meaning that all karma is burned away and that almost at the end of your path, you don't need to be in physical body anymore. So you don't incarnate anymore. Our next subject to talk about is called, there's a gap in consciousness. So between the mind and the personality and the higher spiritual triad, there's a gap in consciousness. So there's a gap in consciousness about trying to connect with the higher mind of the soul, and then ultimately also with the spiritual triad. So this gap is in essence a block to communication with the higher triad and blocks the process of at-one-ment taking place. The gap can be bridged with the creation of what's called the Antakarana, or bridge, via visualization or projection of consciousness of a thought form created by the spiritual seeker. Now, we'll be talking about what this is later on, but not necessarily now. But it basically is the idea about once you get clear and very still within your mind, you get this sense and presence of your soul, and you project yourself, project your sense of self into that, and you and you basically penetrate that deeper part of yourself. It takes time, and it's an active will is what it is. Visualization here is an active will. So the spiritual seeker and later the disciple bridges the gap in meditation by visualizing a line of energy across the abstract mind and connecting with the soul. So again, you're projecting an energy doing this. This is what you will learn to do in meditation. The soul, being the lowest level of the spiritual triad, is then open to the energies of the higher triad, which can be transmitted to the personality, or the soul acts as a conduit, thinking of that too. Once you bridge this gap and you make this connection with the higher triad, you're basically bridging the gap and allowing these higher energies to come forward into your consciousness as a personality. This connection begins the path of probation, and continues on the paths of discipleship and initiation. We'll talk about these specific paths. The process of probation, discipleship, and initiation will be discussed in podcast number 4 after this. The real work of bridging the gap, involves the disciple using his will to relate the lower aspects, that is, his threefold personality, with the 3 divine aspects of the spiritual triad, and he will do this with thought energy. So the correspondence will be his lower mind, his lower concrete mind, relates to the manas, which is the higher aspect of the mental plane. So you have a sense of your thinking capacity, your sense of cognition, and you in meditation, you relate this to the higher mind and its capacity for thinking. And so you do the same thing with your emotional self, where you get a sense of your feeling nature, and then you make your connection with the buddhi, the plane of the intuition. The buddhi energy comes forward through the abstract mind of the soul and connects with your emotional self. And the physical relates to the Atma, or the spiritual will, and helps transform your lower physical and willful nature. So separation and cleavages in the mind. The concept of cleavage is understanding that certain divisions and separations exist between particular body and personality and with the soul. So the idea here is that there is this cleavage, this term cleavage, another esoteric term. It's the understanding that there's an actual block that exists. Perhaps you're using your concrete mind too much, like you're involved in yourself in some physical activity or something you have to get done, and it blocks out your intuition, for example. In order to get to your higher intuitive mind, which you want to get to, or you want to feel more intuitive, you need to get quiet and still. Perhaps spiritual study can be a quiet, still thing for you to do. But understanding that there is a separation that inhibits or blocks fusion and integration. And you need to, in your meditation, you will ultimately get sensitive enough to sense what these may be, your blocks or your cleavages in this case, between your emotional and mental bodies. Perhaps you want to express yourself more freely emotionally, so you could have some type of a block there, which could be causing that up a problem there. In essence, cleavage is identifying any separation that exists in your consciousness that prevents you or inhibits the flow of intuition or impressions and illumination coming from the soul or the spiritual triad. So your goal, your spiritual goal, once again, is to create an alignment with your soul, preferably in meditation, and be able to open up yourself to the soul and to the spiritual triad and remove anything in consciousness that causes separation, cleavage, or blockage. It's especially important to know during the integration process, during path of discipleship, where you become the conscious observer of energies and processes happening in your consciousness. I'll discuss this in the podcast number 4, the next podcast, about the path of discipleship and about the nature of becoming the observer. Cleavage is overcome through meditation, as I said, by allowing the forces and energies of the soul to flow uninhibited throughout the consciousness and the etheric body. The etheric body is that it's the next to your dense body. Your physical dense body has a certain denseness to it. The atoms in it are dense, and you get a physicality sense of it. Your etheric body is just one step up from that, and that's a corresponding dense body also, but it has a higher vibration, and that's where your chakras are located. Meditating and connecting with the abstract mind facilitates reorientation of the personality so that it can connect with the solar spiritual triad. And this is certainly most accomplished by bridging the gap with the lower mind and the higher mind through meditation, of course. Now let's leave the mental process and let's talk about the astral plane, or the plane of emotions. On the face of it, emotions are a conglomeration of interacting forces and energies. Emotions and feelings often create a distorted depiction of reality. The major purpose of the path of liberation is to completely purge all distorted views of reality for enable clear seeing on all planes. This is achieved through alignment and integration with the soul. So in this case, we want to purify the emotions so that only pure love and pure reason are in our consciousness. And so we're not distracted with hate and selfishness and jealousy and things like this. We want to purge those completely. So emotion is a reaction to someone or something and stimulates the feeling nature of the emotional astral body. The results are often emotions of fear, love, jealousy, hate, anger, greed, joy, elation, and desire. So we can think of emotions as felt thought. The conscious seeker is keenly aware of the dualities felt in his emotional nature. That is, he feels pleasure, but is keenly aware of the opposite is pain. At some point on the path, he will understand that becoming unattached through dispassion and bringing balance and alignment to his nature will result in eventual integration and liberation. In the advanced stages of spiritual development, such as the second initiation, which I'll talk about in the next podcast, the concept of initiation, he will willfully suppress those feelings that are destructive to the soul's nature. That's not turn off emotions. That's just getting rid of all emotions that are destructive to the soul's nature, which is love and cooperation and goodwill and understanding. We know that negative emotions can be transformed through mental understanding and applied techniques. Thus, in meditation, you will observe that the negative emotion, such as anger, and how it creates a separation in consciousness from others and blocks any inspiration from the soul. So you get angry, and people will see that, or if you're with people will see that, and they'll simply says, "Oh, I can't be with this person. I can't be with that energy. I don't feel angry, so I don't want to be with that angry energy." So that's why people are separated from that, and that's why anger is a energy that blocks the higher inspiration from the soul. When you are confronted with an illusion, or what we call a glamour, which is an illusion in the emotional astral body, it is best dealt with on the mental plane, on the next plane above the astral, with the help from the soul, by using mental techniques. So I feel fear. How do you get out of fear? You think your way out of it using techniques. And I will share techniques with you in another podcast. There is a technique called the technique of light. These are much of the techniques I'm going to be imparting over this podcast and future are techniques that come from a book by Alice Bailey called Glamour, A World Problem. And she describes many different techniques in there for grounding yourself, for dealing with difficult emotions and thoughts, and certainly dealing with fear, things like this, dealing with anger. So using a technique called the technique of light, you can bring awareness of what you are emotionally dealing with and merge with the soul to bring forth a higher aspect to overcome. So take, for example, you're feeling the energies of hatred and intolerance and separatism. And what you want to do is you realize this is not good for me. It does not feel good. People are running away from me. So how do you balance that? Well, you know that the opposite of that is cooperation and goodwill and understanding. Those are energies of the soul's nature. So you want to merge with that. So the technique of light basically is very simple. You basically take you basically have those energies. Let's say you're sailing, you're having a feeling of hatred or intolerance or something in your consciousness, and you want to merge that with something higher and greater. So you basically, you know that this is not good for you, so you say, I want more cooperation. So you think of cooperation, and you think of hatred or intolerance, the energies of those, and you merge them together. And you keep doing that until there's a transformation that takes place in your mind of where the energy of hatred and intolerance are dissipated. It sounds complicated, but it's basically, if you think of a Venn diagram, you know, the two circles that overlap, right? So you have the hatred in one circle and the cooperation in the other, and you just merge those together. And that's the soul and the personality working in cooperation together. It's very important. Sincerity is key, that you really want to get past this. So you remember how this technique works. In your consciousness, and you can repeat it over and over again as much as you have problems. And know that when you're using the technique of light, this is the first of many techniques I'll be imparting. When you use this technique, you are achieving an alignment and integration with the soul's energy and allowing the higher Buddhi, if you're so connected with the plane of intuition, to replace your lower reactive emotional nature. Moving on with the emotional body, a significant portion of the emotional astral nature is made up of kama manas. Kama manas is a Sanskrit term. It means desire mind. The desire mind is diluted by the world of form, physical plane objects. I desire this. I want this. I want to go shopping to get this. I'm obsessed with it. It's more going. The desire mind is more going toward the little bit of an unbalanced nature. You can have desires. I desire to live. I desire to have scissors to be able to cut paper because I need to have this as an object. That's an intelligent use of the mental plane. But you can have an emotional. Regarding a feeling nature, you may say, I desire hot chocolate over coffee, for example, or tea. I desire a particular type of bread versus another type of bread, whatever. It's just simply, it's more of a feeling nature of what you want for yourself. But again, when the desire mind, which is it's a lower aspect of the thinking capacity, but it still is emotion. The desire mind is diluted by the world of form. I want these objects. And you seek to acquire experiences doing this too. I need to escape from something, for example. Let me go on vacation. Well, vacation can be very relaxing, but it can also be, I want to get away from something because I don't want to think about it right at the moment, or I don't want to resolve this right at the moment. And it's usually resulting in the experiencing pain or pleasure. This is a combination of emotional, astral, and lower mental concrete mind energy. And together these create what we call a glamour or an illusion in the lower planes. And this is something to be looked at spiritually to be able to evolve. The desire nature can create obsession and addiction. Man's desire nature drives him to want objects and shopping and gambling and alcohol and drugs and sex and going into debt. And I want to get involved with sports or sporting activities. I want to do physical exercise. Any of these can lead to an obsession or an addiction in the mental or astral bodies, emotional bodies. The issue of kama manas, desire, lower desire, drives a person and vitalizes or satiates the emotional nature and blocks the soul's presence. So these are all things that can possibly block the soul's energy. We should also understand that there is a higher desire to connect with the energies of the soul and integrate the lower personality with the Buddha of your consciousness. So this is a higher desire. What is the difference between desires and emotions? Emotions are created when a person feels and he thinks about his feeling, resulting in a reaction felt in the emotional body. A desire, on the other hand, is emotional feelings which are stimulated by lower mental thought forms, and they enter your emotional nature. So I want this for my own satisfaction. That's known as the desire body or desire mind. So when higher desire becomes dominant, the spiritual seeker tames his lower emotions and desires. To achieve this, his goals should be to practice more acceptance. This is a holding of a positive attitude toward the conditions in which you live. Ideally, this will be a right understanding of how your concrete mind functions, of your personality, of your life situation, of where you live, and that you will not become overcome by lower desire. So you accept your living conditions and your how you conduct yourself with yourself and other people, how you feel about yourself in relation to other people. So you let go of the concept of I don't need to have or want, or I don't need to be in control. These are concepts to look at, probably in meditation, using the concept of the observer, which I'll talk about in a future podcast. You want to embrace the concept of poise. Practicing poise involves completely subduing all emotional reactivity and minimizing emotional disturbances in the personality. So here we contrast reacting to someone or situation in favor of responding. A response comes from a place of poise in awareness and leads to greater discrimination and mental clarity. Well, it's also an understanding that being responsive to something is more of an intuitive understanding too. That's something you grasp and understand later on as you integrate deeper within yourself. An initial control of the desired nature begins in the probationary path, which I'll discuss in the next podcast, and continues well into the path of discipleship and initiation. Learning to control desire will go a long way towards spiritual progress. A point on emotions. We are not advocating turning off the emotions, but learn to have a higher expression with love and understanding, which means being responsive and not reactive, ideally emanating from the Buddhic plane. I also now want to make some comments about how emotions affect the physical form, that is, your body, and this will lead us into a discussion about the physical etheric vehicle. So what happens when desire is so strong and you don't get your way, or you can't have the object of your desire? The result, the lower mental body and vital body, it's also called, are impacted and stressed. The medical profession and mainstream media have for a long time recognized the direct correlation between the mind, attitude, emotions, and the body. For example, we know that anger centers around the agitated solar plexus, which is the third chakra, located around the stomach level. This results in experiencing problems around digestion, pain in the abdomen, anxiety, fear, worry, and headaches. We know that the nervous and endocrine systems work with the glands. The glands, when stressed, will secrete hormones such as adrenaline into the bloodstream, causing a general unsettled feeling, possibly fear, anxiety, hatred, separativeness, and selfishness. With an increased amount of adrenaline in the system, the person may become more aggressive and unstable. These all block soul energies. Without emotional stress and mental anxiety, the higher mind is engaged. This allows for impressions, higher ideas, ideals, intuition, and the flow of soul consciousness. For dealing with any of these anxieties, the technique of light, which I imparted before, is an excellent tool for overcoming any emotional limitations. Continuing on the discussion of the human constitution, we'll close in this podcast with talking about the physical etheric body. The dense physical form we know is made up of our body, its organs, and the five senses. But the etheric, or known as vital body, is made up of chakras and nadis. Nadis is N-A-D-I-S. That refers to, it's a Sanskrit term referring to the interconnectedness or the carriers of energy within the etheric body. I'll talk about those in a little bit. On a subtle level, that is, when you're in meditation, for example, the etheric or vital body is the lowest form of response apparatus, and it represents the focus of the soul on the physical plane, and it's also the body through which the soul can cause change or influence in the physical body and also in the consciousness of the spiritual worker like yourself. So the etheric body is directly related to physical health, and it is seen as the vitalizing energy for the individual physical body. It's made up of more subtle matter than the dense physical form, and its primary function is to receive and transmit force, such as prana and stimulation from the soul, to the organs and the endocrine and nervous systems and the bloodstream. These forces all together from the soul act as vitalizing energy. There is an energy known as prana, which you've probably heard of, is a term describing the electrical field that manifests in the world as vitality energy, and it provides life or vital life principle that animates all phenomenal life on the cosmic physical plane. So all sorts of living beings, anything from the plant kingdom to the animal kingdom to the human kingdom, all respond to prana. And pranic emanations are also generated from the physical sun. Although growth of cells in the physical body are stimulated, it does not work with form building, but conserves or maintains the form, the body that is, through promotion of health of the parts. Now let's talk a little bit about the chakras. Again, we're just talking about background information, just so you know where you're working with in consciousness when we get to the part of meditation and working as the observer and working with your own being, your own physical body, emotions, and thoughts. So the chakras are known as the centers of energy, and on the etheric and dense physical level, there are 7 major chakra centers, and which affect the human physiology. Each has a corresponding effect on the glands and of the endocrine system of the physical organs. And they are, the crown has a connection with the pineal gland and the brain. The ajna center, or the third eye, affects the pituitary body, the ears and the nose and the eyes. The throat connects with the thyroid and the bronchial tubes and the lungs and the vocal cords. The heart, the thymus gland, and the immune system. The solar plexus, the pancreas, the liver, and the stomach. The sacral is the gonads, the reproductive system. And the base is the adrenal glands. These energy centers are overlaid and connected to the physical body through the satratma, or the thread that's connected in our heart. It's the life thread going into our heart. It gives us life, vitality from the soul. These are all stimulated by the soul at periodic intervals in the spiritual seeker's life for facilitating an alignment in the lower mental, emotional, and physical nature to bring the spiritual worker's personality into a coherent and functioning unit. Now, I mentioned the nadis. It's pronounced nadis, and it's N-A-D-I-S. These are another Sanskrit term, and it refers to the carriers of life energy in the chakra system. The etheric body is made up of an extensive network of tiny lines of force called nadis. These are finer and subtler matter from the physical and correspond to the human nervous system. And through these lines of force, these nadis, the system, the entire etheric system and the chakras are nourished and conditioned. They are also important for the function of consciousness and sensations in the human aura. Nadis also interconnect with the 7 major chakras and flow from the base of the spinal column to the head. During expansions of consciousness, the 3 main channels of the etheric body come into play, known as the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna. These are Sanskrit terms. Again, we don't need to get seriously deep into these, but they are found on the spine and on either side of the channel, the central channel known as the Sushumna of the etheric body. And the 3 channels that I just mentioned there, they are under the direction of the soul and consciously aware disciple, willfully move energies up and down the channels to hasten the burning away of any remaining etheric webs and blockages surrounding any center. So when you get deep into meditation, you get clear, you get quiet and still, you're able to sense these energies if you tune into them, and you can possibly cause energy to move through them consciously. And you could possibly, we talked about cleavages before too, so these can possibly break any cleavages, break any blocks, or move energy forward. So another concept to consider with the human constitution is training your mental, emotional, and physical bodies for service. When I speak of training here, I'm referring to preparing the matter of the physical and etheric bodies for a connection with the soul and performing service. A body composed of spiritually unprepared lower and dense matter will prevent the spiritual seeker from making contact with the higher vibration of the soul. Keep in mind that the higher vibration of the soul would have virtually no impact on a non-evolved physical, brain, and etheric body. So to prepare and maintain the physical and etheric body, to be agile and a useful tool in the soul for service, it is recommended at a minimum that the spiritual seeker has the following daily regimen in place. Pure and vital food. The individual should decide whether to eat pure food, such as organic and vegetarian diet, or as feels appropriate. If you feel you need some meat, some heavier protein, then that's what you do. But what you're doing is you're vitalizing the physical body with what it needs. Tune into what it feels like and what it needs. So cleanliness of the body. Practice good hygiene and keep the body clean from disease. Get sunshine. Take it in wherever and whenever it's healthy to do so, as the body needs to stay vitalized. This is, we talked about prana before, so it helps to get prana. Sleep. Spiritual seeker must have enough sleep to enable him or her to carry out the spiritual work with the greatest facility. If the physical body is tired or lacking in energy due to poor nutrition or not enough rest, then the body controls the situation and keeps the spiritual seeker from making soul contact and performing meaningful service. So, obviously, you can't meditate well if you're too tired or you don't feel like it or something like this. So you want to make sure that these ideas of providing and caring for your body are in place. And it goes without saying that physical exercise, daily exercise, or engaging in physical activity is important for maintaining a healthy body. Keeping the fluids and the energies moving throughout the system is very useful. Drink lots of water. Exercise will benefit and overcome health conditions and diseases and help change one's mood. So that's totally valid. Diet and exercise help soul development and unfoldment. Besides diet and exercise helping in your overall well-being, it also helps you maintain a sound mental, emotional, and physical body for service. This overall mindset provides you of an awareness that you are a fully unified being expressing the soul's intent moving through you. I Finally, I also recommend that you have a regular spiritual practice in place, which I'll be discussing in detail in a future podcast. For my next talk in podcast 4, I'll be beginning a discussion about the integration process. This will also involve talking about the stages of transformation in development of the life of the spiritual seeker.